Welcome back to the labbuildr Unleashed session for SQL Always On. In the last chapter we installed SQL Always On and waited for the setup to be finished. Setup now is finished within 34 minutes, so that's normal time on an average SSD. If we just go to our Always On environment, we could do the first test and start the SQL Server management studio on the primary SQL Server to check if Always On is set up correctly. So we connect to the first node and the MS SQL labbuildr instance. So it opens up the instance. We go to databases and see, okay, there's a synchronized database called AdventureWorks. So when this is here, everything might be nice and happy. So we go to the Always On availability group and we see labbuildr AAG. That's the name of the primary Always On availability group, and we can see there are two secondary copies on node 2 and node 3. Going back to the networker server, we could use my script that I had for that I used for Hyper-V as well. So we cd to cd scripts and do a add nsr user minus backup admin, and in this case it's svc underscore SQL adm. That's my SQL admin user minus node prefix minus host prefix AAG. So I go and look for all hosts named AAG and add the SVC SQL ADM to the application admins group. So if we go to the application admins, there's currently no SQL user in it, and this should change after we run the script. Also, I'm adding the SQL admin to the administrators list, so this should change as well. So if we go right now to the application admins, you will see that the SVC user is in here. And if we go to the networker server admins, go to properties, we will see similar. So we are added in here. That's a requirement that we need for in order to do backup recovery with VDI and all that stuff. You might see that from the guides. Next thing is we go to clients and run through the new client wizard, and we add the AAG cluster. How do we name it? No, that's the AAG cluster. Well, the first thing that we might want to do is we go to computers and do a refresh. That's on the domain controller. You see that's the AAG cluster that I built with those 3 nodes. And there's also a labbuildr AAG listener. So that's the SQL listener listening to port 5555 for the AAG cluster itself. So back to the networker server, we query for AAG cluster. And click on next. Per default, it selects file system, so we have to select SQL Server here and go to the next. And you can see networker client version 8.2.1.0 build 681 is the build of the NMM module. And we just wait a few seconds. Per default, it defaults me to client direct. We select the DDVE node pool for data domain backups, and we select any interface, even if IP will be good enough or best. And now he's running through the backup options wizard and wants to query the elements that we have. While he's doing that, there's one thing to mention. If we go to the Always On availability group and click on properties, there are some default settings I made already during the setup of Always On because I did a scripted install. First thing is you can select the replication mode, synchronous or asynchronous in here. Networker supports both, but you always also can select the backup preference. I set automatically to prefer secondary. Everybody is a 50% chance, and we can exclude replicas here from being backed up. The other thing that we might want to set is readable secondary to yes. I did this automatically in during my setup, so you have nothing to change in here. But if you go to a production environment, make sure those requirements are met. So right now we are querying the SQL nodes for the backup object. So we found the AAG cluster, and it's called the labbuildr AAG. And this is my instance on the first node, on the second node, and on the third node. We click on next here. We need to specify a remote username. It's called svc_SQL ADM. And the password again is password 123. And we click on next. And then we come to some specific settings, like we want to have database consistency check options or some striping options, compression. We leave this to the default in here. We can specify a client comment here, AAG with VDI. And so VDI is the default backup selected here. And then we have to select the group. I create a new group. It's called SQL_DD. That's my data domain backup, and I set client retries to 0. So whenever there's a failure, I don't want to retry it on the first time. And the next thing that we do is we select the backup server that we want to talk to, and click on create. Once this is done, we have all 3 nodes in here, and we click on the finish button. There might be 2 or 3 minor things that we might have to change. So we go to the groups, and the group should do a backup to my data domain. So we have to make sure that the media pool is accessible by that group, and we click OK here. Then we go back to configuration, visit the group properties, make sure that the backup command is nsr sql save. That's the SQL save command for the VDI infrastructure. The other possibility would be having nsr snap VSS save if we want to do VSS backups. That's something that we do in a later chapter. So the pool is DDV node 1, everything is fine, and we can close that, and we can just start the backup of that group. So we click on start. Yes, we want to start a backup of that group. We go to the monitoring tab and see SQL DD group is starting. So we might want to do a double click on here to see what's happening. Right now we are going out, talking to the open backup command infrastructure, with talking to the SQL service, and get the node that's the preferred node for the backup. From there we start a VDI backup transfer to the data domain device, so the client directly copies its data to data domain, and should be the node 2 in this case. Since the data that I have in that is not too much, we might want to wait now. It's only, I think, a 25 max or something. That's not the biggest database. If there is a failure, it will happen immediately now. If it works, and it looks like it's working, so we completed the backup to the data domain of this always on availability group, and then the whole save set will be finished soon. The only thing that we need to do right now is backup the index and do a bootstrap backup from the networker server, and then the save set is completed successfully. So stay tuned or tune in for the next chapter, which covers some restores of SQL and eventually the SQL VSS portion. And thank you for your time, and see you soon.